Hello again. I had an interesting question last night at our Monday workshop. We have a workshop every Monday night for our cycling club, our EBR cycling club, and also for our coached athletes. So it's usually quite an interesting chat because there's some very knowledgeable people and some very experienced people. And of course, if you want to join, then it'd be great to have you on board. So the question was, why am I personally doing long training rides and then having a lot of recovery time between them and then doing another longer ride and building up the distance that way, rather than training more frequently and in a more sort of conventional way? And the reason I got asked that question is because you might be following another thread on these videos is my fitness journey as I'm training to try and do Randonneur around the year starting next month in December. So you might like to follow those videos and ask me some difficult questions, or join the club and join in, and we can interact, and maybe it'll be helpful for you. And during this video I'll explain some of the methods that I use to decide what to work on, and also maybe how to do it. Last time we talked about having an overall framework to feed into the weekly routine, and that the actual weekly routine is the most important. But if you have an overall framework, an annual framework of maybe 6-week blocks, you can decide what to work on when, and then you can address your weaknesses and build towards your goals as you become more and more specific as your main A events come up. And this is just a step into a bit more detail of how to identify where those weaknesses might be, and therefore give some idea of how to focus your training. So in answer to the question at the start, why am I doing long rides, longer and longer rides, and spending a lot of time recovering between them and not really doing a lot of training in between them? Well, firstly, I hadn't anticipated the long rides taking so much out of me. So I did 120 kilometres about a month ago, and it's really taken me until now to recover from that. And then I did another 165 kilometres, an Imperial Century, 100 miles at the weekend, which was quite a big step up from the 120 kilometres. Although I feel much better after the 100 miles than I did after the 100 kilometres, ironically. But I've made a few lifestyle changes, which I'll talk about perhaps in another video. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I'm building up to be able to ride 200 kilometres, and I see that as my biggest weakness. I'm not really having a problem with my average speed. I can ride at 20 kilometres an hour, probably a little bit more, and probably now with the training effect from the 165 kilometre ride, probably be able to do 200 kilometres around that speed. So I'm not too worried about the speed. What I am worried about is the distance or the duration that I'm going to have to be sitting on the bike for, which is a bit different to what I've done in the past. And therefore the primary focus of the training has been the long rides, and whatever I can do in between the long rides is just a bonus. And as it's turned out, I've not been able to do very much between the 120 kilometre ride and the 165 kilometre ride. So how do you identify the weaknesses for you? A lot of people come to me and they want to get faster. They can complete the distance that they need to do, but they can only just do it within the time limit. And it's a very unpleasant experience, because if they say they're doing a 400 kilometre Audax ride or a 600 or something, they have to do it with almost no rest. And they want to ride faster so they can have a much more enjoyable experience by taking a bit of, having a coffee break or something, or a few hours sleep. So their focus is actually the opposite to mine. They're trying to build their average speed, whereas I was trying to build the amount of time that I can ride for. Anyway, whatever your focus is, there's one basic principle that holds, that you go faster. Your maximum speed for a short duration is higher than your maximum speed for a long duration. You can't go faster for a long way than you can go for a part of that distance. So your maximum power for 5 minutes can't be higher than your maximum power for 1 minute. And your maximum power for 30 minutes, sort of your FTP type power, can't be higher than your maximum power for 5 minutes. So that principle holds. So it might be that you've got to get faster at shorter distance to be able to ride faster for longer distances. And there are ways we can sort of think about how to resolve that problem. And we can use a series of tests to identify where your strengths and weaknesses are in relation to the short-term powers up to maybe an hour or 2 hours. And we can use those tests to understand how to get a bit faster. It works best if you've got access to a power meter, but it doesn't have to be a power meter on your bike that you ride outside. It can be just a smart trainer or a calibrated trainer that gives you some sort of analogue of power. Or what you could do is just do some Strava segments, and that gives you a fairly good estimate of power over the duration of the segment. But most people I talk to nowadays have got access to some sort of smart trainer which gives them powers. So you can do tests, like you can do a 1 minute test, a 5 minute test, a 30 minute test, which are the durations that I tend to use. And that'll give you what's known as a power duration curve, which is obviously higher at the 1 minute end and lower at the 30 minute end, and it extends out if you doing longer rides to 3 hours, 4 hours, and it gradually goes down. And you can use that to estimate your FTP if you want. Like most things, it's not simple. How your 5-minute power relates to your 30-minute power is different for different people. It's very individual. So your 5-minute power and your 1-minute power are dependent on, to some extent, on your what's known as your anaerobic capacity, which is the amount of energy you've got available to go above your FTP in simple terms. And some people have more than others. I don't have very much. I've got a very low anaerobic capacity, so my 5-minute power and my 1-minute power isn't much higher than my 30-minute power. A good sprinter can go a lot higher with the 1-minute power than they can with the 30-minute power. So these principles are individual to you, so you have to do a bit of fiddling about to work out what works for you. But it's quite easy to just try something, see if it works, and if it doesn't work, then try something else once you understand the principles of it all. So taking an example, 2 power duration curves, firstly myself, and you can see that my 30-minute power is about 86% of my 5-minute power. So that's fairly close, and it might be that it's worth me spending some time working on my VO2max once I've built up enough endurance to ride 200 kilometres, and then I can get a little bit faster. But if you then look at this curve for a female elite bikepacker, you can see that a 30-minute power is 74% of a 5-minute power, which is quite a big difference. So it seems like there's some scope to bring her FTP up to be closer to a VO2 max. And the reason I've got these data for her is I wanted to do a power profile. And the first test I do on one day is I do 5 seconds, so some short sprints, 5-10 second sprints, a 1 minute, a couple of 1 minute efforts, and a 5-minute effort, and that's all one training session or one workout. And that gives the short-term powers. And the main one we're using here is the 5-minute power, just to illustrate the principles. And then later in the week, once she's recovered a bit, then we do a 30-minute time trial. And then we've got these 2 data points, and we can compare them and make an assessment of where we want to do the work. And I'd actually planned out the season. I'd planned a series of 6-week blocks, and what I was going to work on first was VO2 max, and then do slightly shorter FTP type intervals, then build into longer FTP type intervals, so that we got a progression of reducing intensity as we got more and more specific towards her event. But having now got these data, I'm going to put a block in of FTP intervals at the start, and then repeat the power profile tests and make a decision on whether to continue working on FTP, see if we can get a bit more out of that, or to go on to something else. So doing these tests has been really helpful and changed the direction of my thinking. She's also increased her FTP by about 15 watts, so given that she's not very big, not very heavy, I think she's gone up from 170 to 185 or something, so a big change over the year, which is really pleasing and a big consequence of the hard work that she's put in, and she's getting the results in the events that she's choosing to do. For longer duration powers, it's a bit harder because it's not very easy to test. Okay, you might want to do you could do 2 hours on a trainer or 3 hours on a trainer, but at a fixed power, and get something from that, but it's not really mapping as well to reality. So if you want to do an event that's going to take 8 hours or several days, then what you do on a trainer at a constant power isn't really that representative of what you can do when you go outside and you're doing a variable intensity effort. So that just has to be done by doing the rides, looking at the data and seeing whether you get better at the rides. And of course, by doing these rides, you can make an assessment of whether your average speed is good enough or you want to improve your average speed, or whether you're really struggling to actually get to the end of the ride, and therefore you need to change some other things to build up your endurance so that you can ride for a bit longer or stay in the saddle for a bit longer. And that might be nutritional changes, it might not just be training. So to build endurance, you're basically doing progressively longer rides like I'm doing and like we talked about at the start. Or to build your ability to sustain a good average speed, you might do these tempo endurance type sessions where you're working a bit harder than your endurance pace, you work harder on the climbs, and then recover a bit on the downhills, how you might ride a longer event. Or you can do some specifically focused sessions that we do, which have been very effective actually with this athlete that I've been talking about, whereby you do something a bit harder. You might do a set of intervals and then ride at tempo pace for a couple of hours, and then do another set of intervals. And you can compare the first set and the second set. Is your performance in the second set of intervals getting close to what it is in the first set? Or do a hill climb at the end, like a 20-minute hill or a 10-minute hill at the end of your longer rides, and see whether that's improving. See whether you're getting, better at producing power or faster at riding up that. Maybe use a Strava segment or set up your own Strava segment, getting faster at doing that segment. So now you've got your data, You can make a decision as to whether you're trying to improve your average speed by increasing your VO2max because it's too close to your FTP, and that's about your 5 minutes. You'd use your 5-minute power for that. Remember, specificity, the specific intensity that you work on is where you're going to make the biggest gains, and the powers and paces around that are also going to come on with it. So you might do 6 by 3 minutes at around about your 5-minute power with 3-minute recoveries, which would be a typical sort of VO2max session. If you need to work on your FTP, you may say your 30-minute power, just use your FTP, do some efforts at your FTP, like your 3 by 8 minutes, your 4 by 8 minutes and 2 minutes recovery, or your 5 by 5 with 1 minute recovery. They're all good FTP type efforts. And also you could do some more sweet spot type efforts or longer FTP efforts where you could maybe do 2 by 25 at FTP. Because bearing in mind that your 20-minute power isn't your FTP, you might do about 40 minutes for FTP or an hour. So you might manage 2 by 20 or 2 by 25 or 3 by 15 at your FTP. What you're trying to do is spend as much time as possible in that specific intensity, and that'll bring on your fitness at that specific intensity. So also remember, you don't want to exhaust yourself. So most people can only manage maybe 3 hard sessions a week. So it might be better to do 5 by 5 minutes with a minute recovery, so you can do another 5 by 5 minutes with a minute recovery later in the week, then do 8 by 5 minutes and then not be able to do anything else for the rest of the week and have to compromise all the rest of your training, because 8 by 5 minutes is less than the 10 by 5 minutes you're doing in 2 sessions. So you're creating more of a stimulus. And it's still not that simple, because you've got to bear in mind the principle of reversibility, so the use it or lose it. So you need to incorporate a bit of all types of fitness into your training routine. So you need to do some long rides, some endurance work, and you need to do some, if you're working on FTP, it's worth doing some sessions, maybe 1 session a month or 2 sessions a month, just working on your VO2max or your short, your minute efforts or your 30-second efforts or something like that. If you are doing very long training sessions compared to what you're used to, it might take you more than a few days to recover, and you obviously won't be able to do those every week. So 1 a month might be enough if you're wanting to push the boundaries of your endurance. But just take your time and plan it out, and then take a sensible step up in duration and then recover from it. And remember, anything around your primary focus is a bonus. You need to be recovered properly so that you can work hard on your primary focus area. If you want some help, then you might like to join our EBR Cycling Club. It's a really good thing, and you get email support from me and Claire. We've got a good group. We have workshops every Monday, and there's some very knowledgeable and experienced people in that group. So we all learn from each other. I learn a lot from the group as well. And then of course we've got the discussion boards, the Strava Club, the Q&A WhatsApp group, so that we're all working together to motivate each other. And it's a really nice environment to be part of, at least that's what I think. And of course the ultimate is working one-to-one with a coach, and that can make a big difference. In fact, one good way to do it is to work one-to-one initially and then join the club if it's a big investment for you. So that's one way to work it, and get in touch if we can help you in that way. In summary, just keep it simple, keep getting out, get that good weekly routine going, keep testing, make small adjustments, and then you'll just gradually keep improving towards your goals. And keep in touch, let us know how you're getting on. And see you next time. Bye.